I've been stuck inside my house for the past 4 days or so. It's not that I don't want to leave my house or anything like that. It's just that I'm too afraid to step foot outside. Let me explain why. Roughly 5 days ago, I got home from work feeling exhausted. I walked into my house and collapsed on the couch that night. I began watching TV for half an hour before falling asleep, still in my work uniform. A few hours later, I was awoken by the sound of thumping. The sound startled me as I sprung up from my sleeping position. I took a few moments to fully awaken. I glanced at the clock above my fireplace, which read 6:56. The sun was setting outside. I laid back down on the couch and shut my eyes as I tried drifting back to sleep. I sprung back up as I remembered why I'd woken up in the first place. Someone was knocking on my door. I found it quite odd that someone was visiting at this hour. I live in the country, practically in the middle of nowhere, so I don't get many visitors. All my family are either dead or living in another state, and since my house stands alone, I've never had any door-to-door salesmen stop by. So basically what I'm trying to say is that I found it quite baffling to have a visitor at my house, especially during the evening. Nevertheless, I did what any normal person would do. I walked up to the door and asked, "Who is it?" I don't have a peephole, so I couldn't see who was outside. There was no answer. "Who is it?" I repeated again. Still nothing. My curiosity was turning into consternation. I wanted to believe it was just a knickknacker, but that didn't seem plausible. Like I mentioned before, my house is a standalone house located in the middle of nowhere. I repeat myself one last time. "Who is it?" Still no answer. I tried shrugging it off and resuming my evening nap, but I couldn't get back to sleep. The atmosphere felt very creepy at the time, and the whole situation felt off. I had a strange urge to open the front door just in case whoever was out there still was, but at the same time there was a force holding me back, like my inner consciousness knew that opening the door would be a mistake. I tried to watch TV to get my mind off it. I turned up the volume to break the tension in the atmosphere. As I was watching, I noticed something move from the corner of my eye. It came outside my window. I peeked through the window and examined my large backyard. I soon caught a glimpse of it. Someone was just standing in my backyard, staring dead at me. I'd like to refer to it as a person, a regular living human being, but that wouldn't be fitting. I'd be better off describing it as something, a creature of some sort, that somewhat resembled a human. At first glance, it looked like a human, but upon closer inspection, there was something wrong with it. Its arms were broken. One of its arms had a bone sticking out of its elbow, while the other one was bending in 2 different directions. Don't even ask me how that makes any sense. One of its legs were shattered. The thing shouldn't have been able to stand up straight. Its face was heavily disfigured as well. Its entire body looked like it had been flattened. It had strands of hair coming down from its head, but other than that, it was bald. The most horrific part of it was all the blood dripping from it. There was blood everywhere. It was covered in blood. I could have even sworn that it was crying blood. I stood still, staring at the horrific abomination, comprised of every conceivable nightmare I could ever imagine. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But most of all, I wanted to run. But I couldn't, because it felt like I was being imposed to stare back at it. Something about it felt familiar to me. It almost felt like I knew what or who that thing was, even though it didn't look like her. I felt as though I was staring at my ex-wife. My ex-wife and I had been together for 5 years before the divorce. It was my fault. I was the one who cheated on her. I didn't mean to have an affair with the other woman. I was just so drunk that night. Too drunk to even think straight. When my wife found out I had sex with another woman, she didn't hesitate to leave me. She took half of everything I owned, along with our son, Thomas. Then, 3 years after we had divorced, she died at an amusement park. One of the ride's compartments broke loose from the ride, and it crushed my ex-wife and my son when it landed. They both died instantly. That all happened 7 years ago. I haven't been seeing anyone else since then. The guilt of what I did back then consumed me, and I can't bring myself to see another woman. I've been living alone ever since. Every night, just me alone in my living room with a bottle of beer. So I'm sure you can imagine how horrified I felt to see what resembled my dead ex staring at me from my backyard. She still wasn't moving, and neither was I. That is, until I heard a familiar noise, a clicking sound. It came from my front door. I was too scared to turn around, but I had to investigate. I very slowly turned my body around, but I found nothing at the front door. Nevertheless, I grabbed a baseball bat that I kept lying around in my living room and crept towards my front door, ready to pounce at anything in sight. As I reached my front door, I instantly noticed something peculiar. My front door was now unlocked. Without hesitation, I locked the door and stepped back as fast as I could. Then, suddenly, the knocking returned. I grabbed the nearest object and barricaded the door with it. I ran back into the living room and grabbed the house phone to call the police. As the phone was ringing, I glanced outside and noticed that the thing's position had changed. It was a little closer now. I closed all my blinds as the phone continued to ring. There was no answer. I hung up and tried calling again, but this time my phone instantly played a beeping noise. The phone line had been cut. It's been going on like this for 4 days or so now. I haven't been able to reach out to anyone, so I can't call for help. It feels like I'm on a repeated loop. Every time I lay my eyes off the front door for even a second, someone or something unlocks it. I always lock it instantly afterwards. Every 5 minutes or so, the knocking comes back. It's driving me insane. To make matters worse, each new day since this hell has started has brought a fresh, new hell along with it. 3 days ago, my power went off. 2 days ago, every sink in my house started pouring out blood. Yesterday, the voices began whispering. I look out my window every so often to check on the thing. It's constantly moving, slowly but surely getting closer to my house. To make matters stranger, I've noticed the sun has been setting for 4 days straight now, and it's stayed that way since. It feels like time is frozen, or rather I'm stuck on a single endless loop. Maybe this is my punishment for what I did to her many years ago. Maybe this really is hell. The door has been unlocking more frequently lately, and the knocking has been growing louder and louder. I could have sworn that I even heard my ex-wife's voice come from outside the front door at one stage. I couldn't make out what it said. Its voice was distorted. I always thought that hell was a place made of fire, where people burn forever for the sins they have committed. I was wrong. Hell is much worse than that, because this is hell. You know what? It just now occurred to me that my front door can't be unlocked from the outside. 2 years ago, my house key broke in the keyhole as I tried to unlock my front door, and it's still stuck there. Ever since then, I've been using the back door. And so ever since then, the only way to unlock the front door is from the inside.